Hello, fellow Sublime Text fanatics. Welcome to the stream. Well, pardon me for just one moment while I verify which one of these pods goes in which ear and plug them into the appropriate charger to make sure that we'll have a way to listen to stuff lately. Hello, Terracin. How are you doing? Welcome to the stream. Welcome to This Week in Sublime Text. Welcome to me wearing a shirt that's riding up for some reason, and second day in the new office chair. See how we go. It feels a little bit lower than the other one. How's everybody doing out there? Hope you're having a great week so far. If you are from my neck of the woods and are Canadian, then happy Thanksgiving to you, because today was Canadian Thanksgiving. So things I'm thankful for include Sublime Text and Sublime Merge, the amazing community that we have here on YouTube supporting the channel. You guys are just out of control. And also the fact that I didn't have to go to work on a Monday. Hey, hey. Although, on the downside, I was playing Metroid Dread, and well named, I will say. If you watched today's video, then what we were covering was a question that somebody had regarding a build system, or rather multiple build systems that they use in order to carry out their action. Sounded like something to create a makefile, something to build software based on the makefile, and then a way to run the program that is actually built. And they said they had 3 different build systems and wanted to sort of chain them together automatically such that oh, hello, Kanguru. Welcome to the stream. Thank you so much. First time I've been able to join. Hey, glad to have you here. We're just talking very briefly about what happened in the video this morning. I did give this particular user a few different ways to sort of streamline their workflow. For example, instead of using 3 distinct build systems, you can define keys for them and treat Sublime more like an IDE. You can actually make a build system execute multiple commands, because command processors can do that. But I thought it would be fun to work out, potentially, if it's possible, a plugin that would allow you to create a build that just executes multiple consecutive builds, assuming that one is complete. Now, there's a couple of things that might be tricky about that, but it seems like a fun thing to do. And let's see, Terracin says, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, by the way. I recently bought a Mac, and I'm very surprised to see that Sublime uses Control-C to copy, whereas Mac uses Command-C. I'm pretty sure that is Command-C should be the key for copying, but we can take a look. Let's jump on in. And Ayush, hello, sir. I am doing well. I hope you're doing well as well. Today is a holiday here in Canada, or today was a holiday, I guess, because today is mostly done. It was Canadian Thanksgiving. So we gave thanks by creating a bunch of cookies and giving them away to our building. But if we did a little thing like this, we could view package file for macOS keys from the default package, pardon me, OS X keys from the default package. And if you look for the copy command, it's bound to Super C by default. Super is the command key on macOS. Much in the same way that toggling the sidebar would be Command K, Command B, or undo is Command Z, and redo is Command Shift Z, or redo or repeat would be Command Y. Cut and copy and paste should be those keys. What kind of keyboard are you using? I can confirm that I use Sublime on Mac, and it's actually the thing that I have the most problem with, because I tend to use more often than not a terminal, or not terminal emulator, but a remote desktop type thing, and then I'm not using a Mac keyboard here, and it is the keyboard Mac over there, and things tend to go all weird on me. But hopefully you might just have something with an errant key binding or such. Oof, that would be a tricky one again. I'm gonna throw that over there for the time being. This is the question. If you watched today's video, you may recognize this. from Equal Minis or Equal Minis. I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce people's names sometimes, so I always apologize if I happen to accidentally get it wrong in some fashion. But the question was, hello, there's a good chance this has already been covered, but on the subject of reusability, I thought this was relevant. Currently, I have 3 build systems: compile, make file, make build, compile, make, and run, execute program. Running each build system individually is pretty annoying. Is there any way to chain these together automatically? For example, having one build system run another before it. One consideration is that it would need to only run the next build system if the previous one didn't fail. Any suggestions? That shouldn't be a problem, Tara, unless you have key bindings there. But note that the file that I'm looking at here is default osx.sublime keymap. Because if you were to look in your user package in the user package files of Sublime keymap, you'll find that there are usually one, but potentially 2 or 3. This one has Linux in the name. This one has OS X in the name. This one has Windows in the name. And when you use the menu item for key bindings, when the window opens, you can see the one on the right says Linux, because that's the platform that I'm on right now. So all else being equal, anytime you bind a key, it should be specific to the operating system that you're using. That said, if you copied your user directory from Linux, you may run into a problem because default.sublime-keymap without the name of a system in here is still a valid keymap, but it will apply to all platforms and not just the one that you're on. So if you've created something like that in your user package, or if a package has created it on your behalf, that could cause this kind of weirdness. But either way, Command C should still copy, even if Control C copies too. So yeah, that is definitely weird. The one on the right, the one that's on the right when you do it, it's possible that you might have copied one from somewhere else. Sometimes plugins and packages will try to augment key bindings on their own. I've seen that happen a time or two. So something may have stuck something in there in a place that you didn't want it. If you remove it from there, that should, well, the file will be named default, but it will be in your user package. Something to check for would be to use preferences, browse packages from the command palette or from the menu. As we know, that will open up the packages folder no matter what platform you're on. Look for a folder named default in here. If you see any key binding files in this, you want to move those out of the way because those are blocking the default key bindings from happening. Here I have some other ones in its place. This is one of the main problems that people have upgrading from Sublime Text 3 to Sublime Text 4. They or something on their behalf has created key bindings in here that blocks the updated versions from Sublime Text 4, and then things don't work the way that you want them to. What are the key bindings for changing the window layouts if there's 2 panes in the current window? Well, let's see. If I create a new window, Control-Alt-1. No, hang on. I have to do it and then see what my fingers type. So Shift-Alt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it jumps to 8, 9, and 0, 8 and 9. If you want to know what those are, you can look into View Layout, and these are the layouts that ship with Sublime Text by default: single, 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns. You can see the key bindings that are bound for these on your platform there. They may be different on macOS. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would imagine not, because they don't use the control key. But yeah, indeed. Welcome, Kangaroo. Or Kanguru. I hope I can answer my question. Today, many developers use VS Code. What's the core advantage of Sublime? If you have a key map in your default folder, Tara, let's do this first. If you have a key map literally in the folder named default, move that away to your desktop and restart Sublime, because the key bindings that are in there are blocking all of the key bindings that are default. You definitely don't want to do that. It's okay to have a key binding file inside of your user package, but you don't want it to be in packages default, or wacky stuff will happen. Hey, awesome. That's cool. And now we'll jump to this one. Jack Rowe says, "Oh, if you have time, I hope you can answer my question. Today, many developers use VS Code. What is the core advantage of Sublime? What do you want to change?" Well, I find, and this is something that we discussed on a fair few streams and here and on Twitch as well, because I also stream on Twitch a couple of days a week on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you have questions about Sublime Text or you just want to hang out, you can swing by. Is that it's a weird situation, because software, there's no such thing as one software that is the best, unless there's only one. And is that even a thing? I don't think so. And the reason for that is what you want out of a tool to make you be more productive is different from what I want, or Ayush wants, or Tara wants, or anybody wants. Everybody has slightly different things that they find useful. So in my personal opinion, I like Sublime more because out of the box, when you very first time you run it, it has a minimum of functionality built into it. But it has a full extensibility nature that would allow anybody to add features that they want. So you start with a core, competent, fast text editor that's very performant, and add onto it the parts that you need in order to make it work the way that you like to work. Visual Studio Code, on the other hand, and I don't use it extensively, I only fire it up occasionally to help other coworkers, is in a line of tools that kind of works the other way. They presuppose that if you are a developer, these are the things that you're going to be doing, and that functionality is sort of there from the get-go. IntelliJ products are very bad for this as well, to varying degrees. And I don't mean that Visual Studio Code is like super bloated or anything, but there is functionality in it that I don't use and would never use, but I have to navigate my way around it. So one of the things that I love about Sublime is that level of building up instead of building across or down. But by any means, whatever tool allows you to work at your best capacity is entirely the right tool for you. And I acknowledge that not everybody loves Sublime Text, not everybody loves Visual Studio Code, and there are different workflows. When it comes to things that I'd like to change about Sublime, that's a good question. I'm sure if you catch me on any given day, I could probably think of something, but by and large, I love it the way that it is right now, realistically. Better HTML support, maybe. Anything that I would like out of it probably relates to having a slightly different functionality available in the API to be able to create more plugins. Would be my guess, I would think. Okay. Let's see. The size of the window. Is it possible to resize the window with key bindings? If your operating system has key bindings for sizing windows, then yes. But otherwise, no. For example, here I can make this window jump to the left and jump to the right and be maximized. And that's it. So I can do that with key bindings, but I can't make it be a certain specific size. You would need something external to do something like that. And this does not, Sublime doesn't do that on the whole. Technically speaking, it's possible to create a plugin in Sublime that has the appropriate native bindings, say for talking directly to Windows or talking directly to the X server or talking directly to Apple's window manager, whatever it happens to be called, to figure out what window something's running in and size it that way. Theoretically, I'm not aware of anything that does that though. Dev's here. Hello, good morning, Dev. Hello, Ashwin as well. And hello, Neon Tuts. Welcome to the stream. And G-Bound as well. Hello. I've found Sublime has more interesting layout options for the view panes, but that wasn't the most important feature for me in the end. Yeah, I'm one of the things that people ask for a lot is the ability for the panels at the bottom of the window, like the console, to be on the left or the right, or the sidebar to be on the right or down, is one of the couple of big things. There's a resize window command. No, well, there you go. Theoretically, you could potentially create a thing. What arguments does it take, Ashwin? Ashwin, by the way, has been my chair might be a little tall. By the way, Axel, hello. Ashwin has been working on a consolidated command list for Sublime Text and Sublime Merge. So there you go. Now that you say that, I remember there being a command similar to that, but I don't remember it working in all cases. But maybe that's just me. Yeah, let's Sublimerge 3 has issues when there's an image that's currently being displayed. Let's clear the console. I guess the question is, what arguments does it take? Can you position it too? Let's do that correctly, shall we? What are these arguments called? Well, that made the window kind of bigger. That made the window kind of smaller. That made it slightly bigger. When it's maximized, you can't. So that's kind of a bummer. Can't change the position either. I don't know how useful it is to modify the size of a window without also being able to position it somewhere else. Nevertheless, I use a different tool for something like that. If I was to have a brand new window and I wanted it at a specific size, I could do so we want this window to be 1280 by 720. Same thing happens there, right? You have to unmaximize it to get it to work. Not necessarily the most seamless of operations. Pardon me. So, yeah. What exactly are you trying to pull or to accomplish, I should say, Ayush? Theoretically, you could potentially size the window in some instances, but not in all instances. And I don't believe there's a way to get the current size of the window either, which is one of the things that frequently comes about when it comes time to size a window. You usually want to position it at a certain place and make it bigger or smaller based on a certain situation. Without being able to do either of those two things, I'm not sure how useful that is overall. Window Manager is usually a good way to go for something like that. But nevertheless, eventually it kind of did something. Like, it works as long as the window is not maximized. So if the idea was you wanted a key to do that, then I guess you need to have two key bindings to do it. One for when the window is maximized that unmaximizes it and then swaps it, and then another one for when the window is maximized, and then you have to remember to push the correct one because you can't determine the size of the window. I guess you could theoretically do something like creepily try to pull it out of workspace information if you have to be using a project. You want to resize the panes. Well, resizing windows and resizing panes aren't the same thing. I do not believe that there's any programmatic way to change a panel. I think there's an issue for that. They remember their size, but that's about it. So there's that. At least I'm not, whoops, that's not what I meant to do, pardon me. Let's clear the console. Yeah, I don't recall if we were to look at the help. Right. Create output panel. You give it a name. And get the output panel to get the view associated with it. Find it if you don't know where it is. Get rid of it. See which one is active. Get the list of them. That's the list of things that you can do with panels. So in that regard, no. Unfortunately, there's not a thing that you can do in that particular case. Let's scoot that back over to there. What I thought what we would work on tonight, unless somebody has, if you got more questions, please feel free to throw those into the chat. But this person asked a couple of days ago now, as we can see here, I just captured this image just before the stream started, that running each build system individually is pretty annoying. Is there any way to chain these together automatically? For example, having one build system run another before it. One consideration is that it would need to only run the next build system if the previous one didn't fail. It's possible to create your own target in a build system that would allow it to know when something is finished so that it could trigger something else. So in theory, something like this could potentially be possible. I can think of a couple of different things that we could do that might make an interesting sort of plugin. Let's see, Ashwin says, so far I've got 302 commands, but yeah, there's still a lot of work in getting the descriptions and argument descriptions and their valid values. Yeah, that part is the hard part, and it's the place where even the plugin that we created in previous streams to navigate all of the available commands in Sublime is tricky, because not only that, and for anybody that hasn't seen that, I got to give focus to the correct program before I do that. If we can do browse command list. This is a plugin that we created in a previous live stream right here on YouTube. It shows you a list of all of the commands that exist within Sublime Text that are implemented as Python plugins. Not all commands in Sublime are implemented as plugins. Some commands, like the ones for moving the cursor around and the like, are implemented in the core and not here in the plugin system. The copy command, for example, is an example of that as well. But this can figure out the list of all plugins that are currently loaded, what commands are in those, and jump you directly to the appropriate location. For example, we did a video recently on the channel about the arithmetic command, and we can see here that the arithmetic command is in the default.arithmetic file, and it takes a single argument of expression. And if we pick that, we can actually jump to it and see that information right here. But one thing that that plugin can't do, unfortunately, without some extra added in metadata, would be to actually tell you what the expression argument is for. And similarly, some items they say they have no arguments. Some will assume that they can take any and all arguments. Let's see if we can find an example of that. I'm not sure of one off the top of my head, but here's one. Diskless marker takes any kind of argument. So this introspection method doesn't work for absolutely everything. I use chain of command. Yeah, the thing that we can actually work out here. If you didn't watch today's video, why the heck not? We can do one of those things where we get a video list. No, that's probably not going to work because I haven't logged in here recently. We probably need to flush it and then probably need to log in again if I had to imagine. If we get the video link, yeah, that's what I thought. Oh, we're not going to worry about that at the moment. But there's a couple of things that you can do if you have multiple builds. One of which is the build command that's built into Sublime Text. Besides being responsible for showing you the list of builds that are available in any given situation. We better change this build system back to automatic for this window. This is the build command asking us. One of the other things you can do is to tell it specifically execute a build, which is one of the things that we did with key bindings in the video today that dropped. And another thing you can do is chain multiple commands by using the shell. However, you can't chain multiple build commands one after the other because the chain of commands command, whether it's the plugin or the one built in or the multi-command, multi-command I believe it's called, is another package very similar to chain of command. Both things you should use if you're not using Sublime Text 4, which has that built in now. It starts the command running and then continues after the command finishes running, but executing builds happens in the background. That's the panel opens and you go about editing while the program is still running, displaying output. There's no way for a following command to know that the previous one has even finished. So doing it like that isn't going to work. But there are ways to jack into the mechanism that is used for something like that. So this is the question. So we're going to just drop that off to the side over there. We'll bring in the help because we might actually want to look up something. If we create a new plugin, what we can do is create a command for something like this. And let's call this multi-exec command, let's say. What we're going to do is we're going to create a build system that uses this command that we're creating instead of the default command that is used for executing things. And in order to do that, the command needs to be a window command. And window commands don't take an edit argument, but they can take any other arguments that we might like. And for our purposes here, we're just going to quickly throw a little bit of that in place, like this. So in theory, this is something that would actually work. Now we can actually do this. We can say print multi-exec and then pass along the keyword arguments like this. I'm going to save this. We'll call this multi-exec. The name of the file doesn't matter as long as it's a Python file in the root of a particular package, in this case, the user package. And now multi-exec exists as a command. So we can say window run command, oops, multi-exec, and there it is. We gave it no arguments, so the arguments dictionary was empty. But we could say 1, 2, and it'll print 1, 2, like so. So this is a window command which currently just echoes what it is that you told it to do. And as a side thing, such a command already exists built into Sublime Text called echo, though here it's an application command and not a window command, so there's only ever one of them. But that's a fun command to use for testing things like this, but we're going to want to implement our own. We're going to need a new build system as well. And we're going to save this. We'll call it test multi-exec, like this. And we're going to leave it at that, but I guess just for our sake here, we'll go into Tools, Build System, and set the build to the name of this one, which, whoops, pardon me, is test multi-exec, like this. Now, if I try to execute this build, it tries to run make, but it can't because there's nothing in here. So this build is actually doing something now, but check this out. If we add a target key in here, and the command that we give it is the one we created here, which is multi-exec, now when we run it, nothing seems to happen. But if you look in the console, it says that. So what we've done here is created our own command to take control of the build when it happens. Right now, all it does is print stuff, so it doesn't do anything interesting at all. If we do this, then when we run it, the shell command is echo I am running. Now, if you actually wanted to create your own plugin that executes a build, you want to have a little bit more functionality in it than just a print. And we're talking about being able to determine what program needs to be executed, start it running in the background. Maybe if you're on Windows, block it from opening a window. Make sure that you can update the environment to be able to give it new environment variables when it's running. You probably want to be able to expand variables in and such. It's a lot of stuff that you have to do, but Sublime already knows how to do that in build systems. If we didn't have this line in here like this, then what it actually does is execute this. Specifically, it's literally running this code telling the shell for the operating system to run this thing. So can we get at that? And the answer to that is yes, because there's a command that's built in called exec that does exactly this. You can see it working there like that. Builds are assumed to have a key that looks just like this if they don't have a target key. But we do have a target key. We have this one. So what we want to do is create a command named multi-exec that does what exec would actually do. And that's fairly easy to do because we can say from default.exec import exec command. And then instead of subclassing this, we can just subclass exec command like this. Now this is the subclass of exec command, the command that that is used to execute programs. If we browse the command list for exec, this is right in your copy of Sublime Text. You can use view package file and enter default exec.py to be able to find the exact same file if you want. You'll note that it's a window command just like ours. And process listener is something that's here because it's waiting for something in the background to actually finish and to do something. But now we've subclassed it. So after we print our arguments, we could say super run, and what it should run with is the keyboard arguments. And I can never remember if you need the stars there or not. So let's find out. If I run the build, now it still says I am running, even though this is multi-exec, but also it says what it's doing down here. From the, cannot type, the multi-exec command. And that's what it says there, and that's what it says there. So we now have our own command that does, basically we've subclassed exec and done absolutely nothing with it, right? Another thing that you probably want to do, note that if I do tools, cancel build is currently grayed out because Sublime doesn't know how to cancel a build that's running like this. If this was, say, sleep 30 and echo, so it should wait 30 seconds and then say that it's running the multi-exec command. It's currently sleeping. If we go into the tools menu, cancel build is grayed out. If I want to cancel this, I can't do it. That says it's there, but it doesn't actively do anything when I pick it. We just have to wait for the 30 seconds to be up, and then when the 30 seconds is up, it'll do the echo that says I'm running from the multi-exec command, and then it'll eventually finish executing and life will be good. So generally speaking, it's done now. If you do something like this, creating our own command, Sublime loses the ability to actually cancel the build, but we can give it that back. Because besides the target command, there's also a cancel command as well, or key rather. And I'm using package dev. These keys are purple to let us know that they're special in this particular way. If you don't specify target, it's assumed to be the exec command. Your build just gets executed. If you specify target, it needs to be the name of a command. That command will be used to start a build. And the arguments that the build gets is the contents of the build file, which is nice. If you want to support canceling builds, and usually you do, you add a cancel key, and this can be one of two different kinds of values. We could have a string in here, like cancel build, for example. We wouldn't want to use that when we create our own. Commonly, if you use terminus, the target is terminus exec, and the cancel is terminus cancel build. Thusly, which tells Sublime, in order to start the build, run the target. In order to stop the build, call terminus cancel in this particular case. Alternately, what you can do is add an object in here and add some extra keys. And what will happen is, if this is in place, the cancel command will be enabled, and when you cancel a build, it'll execute the target with all of the arguments that it would have given to the program when it starts it, but also it will pass along these. And the built-in command that is named exec has as one of its arguments kill, which defaults to false, but if you set it, it kills the current process and leaves. This is how canceling builds works in the core. So our build can have similar keys, and now when we execute it, it's still going to wait 30 seconds, but now we can go into tools and choose cancel build, and it'll actually cancel the thing because it reruns exec. So what we have now is basically the world's lamest plugin because it does exactly what exec does, only it prints its arguments to the console. It might be interesting to note that when I ran this program, it got the shell command argument, and when I canceled it, it got the shell command argument, but it also got kill true, the items that we added here. But you'll notice that target and cancel are keys in this build, and they don't show up in this list. That's because there are some keys here that Sublime uses on its own to know what build should actually be executed or how to carry it out. If those ones don't get passed as arguments, everything else does. So you can even modify this to have extra arguments. If you wanted to have something like, build number, and the build number, to do something. Maybe it needs to pass an extra argument to the command being executed that forces something. However you might want to work this. Now our command will get that as an argument. It will blow up because build number is an argument that exec knows about, but this could extract it and throw it away. So that is something we can do. So all we need, realistically, is to be able to know when a build is actually finished, right? In order to do the thing we want to do, one of the key aspects is being able to actually do something in the first place, which we can do because we can leverage the fact that by subclassing the exec command, we are the exec command, and the exec command knows how to run programs. So that part's easy. This is an 8-line plugin that implements exec, essentially. What you actually also need to know is whether or not the build is finished, and if it is finished, whether it was a successful build or not. If it fails, then you don't want to move forward with doing anything else. How do we do that? That's actually something that comes as a part of the exec command. If we look at the actual command, it implements or it subclasses window command, which is one of the 3 types of commands you can create in a Sublime Text plugin. There's one instance of this class created to control this command for each window, which is why each window has its own distinct build output. And these projects can only be opened in one window at a time as well. But it also has process listener or process listener, depending on what part of the world you happen to be in. If you trace through the code in the run method here, if we're told it to only update annotations and we're showing errors in line, then it should actually update them. This is what is used if you run a program, run a build that generates errors, and you set up a build system appropriately to capture errors from another file. You can double click on the error in the output panel down in this area, and it would take you to the appropriate place. And when that happens, if there were any errors, you want them to appear. This is what actually does that. We already saw this part. If you ask the thing to kill itself, it will. New in Sublime Text 4, if kill previous is set to true and this process is also running, kill. Sublime Text 4 will set this to true when it executes the build. You can set it to false in your build if you want to execute a build and then execute another build while keeping the first one running, which is actually the subject of a Stack Overflow question that someone is asking, possibly the one that's bountied. So the answer to that, if somebody wants to get an easy 100 reputation on Stack Overflow, is point out to somebody that that's how that works. Even if the build failed, the build still finishes, right? Yes, because exec is actually invoking some external program. And what actually happens, there's a method in here called on finished. I believe is the one that we want for here. Yeah, it changed ever so slightly. This, as a method, is referenced here because this is something that is in the async process. What basically happens when you launch a build with the exec command is it does a little bit of setup, update errors if we were asked, kill if we were asked to kill previous builds if we're asked to. If the output panel like this has never been created, create it now. Set a default working directory if one wasn't specified based on the file name of the current file. Set things into the output panel. So you'll notice this never shows line numbers, even though up here it does. This is the thing that sets that. It doesn't have a gutter. Would you like to have line numbers in your build output? You can modify this plugin to make that happen. Then it figures out what program it actually needs to run. And when it needs to run it, this is the entirety of executing this program, creating an async process, telling it that we are the listener listening for events. The whole of executing builds happens right in here. We can see listener is the item there. This is the thing that sets up to actually execute the program, depending on whether you're on Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. It uses the subprocess class or subprocess modules popen function from the standard Python libraries to execute this thing. It starts threads going that listen for data being printed to the console and ships it off to actually be displayed. That's the methods that are down here. It tells the listener that there's some data. But note, if this thing is finished, then the listener invokes on finished. This is the magic that we want for this to work. We need to jump down to here. On finished, if there's not a build running, then leave. If it was killed, then we can say it's canceled. Otherwise, we can say exactly what time it was displayed. The important part is this. Get the exit code. If it's 0 or there isn't an exit code, then this thing just natively exited and worked just fine. Otherwise, this is where you say finished in 3 seconds with exit code 1 if something failed. So what we can do is a little something like this. I'm going to copy this whole shebang, this part here, like this. And I'm going to take it over to our command and put it in here. Now the important thing in this case is to say super on finished with that. Because whatever this thing is trying to do, we want to make sure that that still happens in our version because we're overriding it. But we can do the same sort of stuff here. If there isn't a process, leave. And then here we can say the process was canceled. And we don't even care about that part. This is just an else. Because whatever we do here, we always want to do. Do we care about that? No. We can say print the build was a success in this case. And in this one, we can say the build failed. Remember, these are going to the console. So I'm going to clear the console. I'm going to run the build. Oh, right. Sorry. Pardon me. We need to remove the thing that it doesn't understand. Okay. Run the build. It seems to be doing something. If I cancel, then it says the process was canceled. That's code from us. We knew that that happened. So that's nice. And also, this is the standard exec telling us that the build was canceled. If I throw this part out like this, then it ran and the console says the build was a success, which again is this because, hey, the build worked. If this build actually failed, which, we might want to do something like exit, well, let's say 69, because we're all adults. When we execute the build, it says I'm running from the multi-exec command, finished in 6 milliseconds with exit code 69. There's the thing that actually executed, and when we look in the console. Oops, that's not the console, pardon me. It says the build failed. And specifically, it could figure out exactly what code it used to fail. So if we would like to have a build that, once it's finished, executes another build, we have the facility to do something like that right here. How you actually set something like this up, that's the part that could potentially be a tricky piece of operation, right? Because the way that the question asks it, running each build individually is pretty annoying. Is there a way to chain them together? For example, having one build system run another one before it. It's possible to do something like that, but it would be tricky. Imagine the idea that something in the build has a key like pre-build, for example, that has some argument inside of it, and it has some sort of keys in it like it normally would. Or maybe it has, arguments for the build command in here instead. So build file might be pre-build, packages user pre-build .sublime build, for example, and then also would need, something like variant. You could do something like this and set this up so that when this build runs, what it tries to do is this. But then we run into a problem of, after that build runs, then what? Or that build could have a post build that says build something after this one is finished. So I can see a couple of potential ways to pull something like that off. What would be a nice way to do something like that? The most obvious thing that comes to mind is that normally, in general, it really is. I would recommend it as a situation, but I can see the here's the thing. In this example, we would do something like echo message 1 and echo message 2 like this, right? And you can chain these as many times as you want, right? As many of these as you care about. If I do this, then we see all 4 of those messages, and I'm unhappy because I used words for one and numbers for the other. But that'll actually work. You see all of the messages there. So technically, if you want to run multiple things, the 2 things that come immediately to mind are doing this, which in the case of what the first person was asking, have the build whose shell command is something like cmake dot and make run, for example. Create the build system, actually build it, and then ask make to run the target that does that. Or maybe you know that the make, when it succeeds, builds something named .bin/artifact. So you can do this and come up with as many complicated type builds as you like. I personally prefer the idea of using the key bindings for make. It's what I happen to do. As a matter of fact, I think we might even see them in here. It's been a while since I've worked on anything C related. But if we looked into the Linux user key bindings, we might find some actual commands for running. I may have removed them. Now, here we go. K for clean, R for run, and specifically if I'm inside of a Lua file, inside of a DataMill project, which is a project at work, it does something slightly different. So build, run, clean. Now, or build would be the build system. The idea behind this is for every C program I write, I always use make, and I always have a target named clean. And it's very easy to create a target named run I have two key bindings, and they will work for any C++ project that you like, as opposed to potentially doing something like this that ties them together. Definitely with something like this. This makes this only work for this project, which is why I use make run and then cause the make file to have a target in it named run, which actually executes things. And in fact, you can make this even nicer, because if your make files run depended on the overall application being compiled first, then you don't even have to say make and make run. You could just say make run. Before it can run it, it'll actually have to build it. So you can save yourself a bunch of time that way as well. But I didn't want to go too long in the video this morning. Now, while this works, the idea of this brings about the idea that there could be arbitrarily large command lines here. This one looks very tight and readable. The whole thing isn't more than 53 characters long, and that includes the name of the key and the punctuation characters, right? Often when you execute a program, it's going to have a bunch of stuff in it and not just one. Or not just one simple thing. And then it becomes more of a pain in the butt to actually do something with it. But what we could do in a plugin like this is say, what if we said shell command is now a list instead? Now, clearly this gets real jacked about it, because that's not how it's supposed to work. But you could say that this is a list of items that are shell commands. So this one could be make, and this one could be /bin artifact, like this. And then if this one wasn't here, and that wasn't syntax highlighted that way, then our custom build could do this. It could say, here are the list of 3 commands. Please execute them in this order. And then the build could know to start with the one at the start of the array, execute that build, and then if the build is a success, go on to the next one. But if the build was a failure, then just stop and cut your losses. That is something that's probably pretty easy to do. And again, if you were using something that was more complicated, this might be a way to go. You could also do something like this. As I pointed out, the build is just executing some arbitrary external program, right? One of the more common things that have been said in the build system videos as of late. And based on that, it's not that difficult, really. It could pull stuff out, you know. This is what I'm thinking here. Yeah. Now this also is kind of fraught, because what if the builds are distinctly different is the important part. And by that I mean there's more than just this. Let's change this to batch shell command like this, so we can put that back to the appropriate thing and not get all cranky about stuff. There's more that you can do in a build, target, and cancel than just this, right? You can use file regex and or line regex in order to capture errors. You can set a working directory so that it knows exactly what directory that should actually be built inside of. You might want to use something like quiet to stop it from displaying the diagnostic. Our command doesn't really care about that one way or the other. You can do, let's see, we did those, we got the target, we got the cancel. You can change the encoding. You can set environment variables. You can directly noodle with the path if you want to do something like that. There's a fair bit of stuff that you can do in a build like this. So the question becomes, how deep does the rabbit hole go on this? Because we could create something called batch command, or sorry, batch build, that is a list. That's not a list. That is a list. But this could be, well, they'd all have to have the same target and the same cancel. I think we would do something like that. But it could be the shell command echo command 1, and then it could also have a file regex of something, and it could have a working dir of the root, and then there could be a second one as well. This should probably be wrapped as a string so it doesn't get all cranky about stuff. And then there could be a second build, and this one's a shell command of echo command 2, for example, and maybe it doesn't have that stuff. If we did something like this, then except for the fact that meta keys like target and cancel and the other perennial favorite here is selector, star.json, let's say, so that that'll actually work, got mad about various arguments. These commands, the ones that show, or these keys rather, the ones that always show up in purple are ones that Sublime uses behind the scenes and won't pass along to us. So we'd never see them. We'd have to say that our plugin assumes those are always going to be the same. But this is a valid set of arguments for this, and so is this. So we could set stuff up like this. I don't know which one of those is better or worse. Certainly, I guess I could see the facility of something like this, again, specifically for the case where these builds are kind of complicated. It doesn't make sense to include them as variants on builds, either because you don't want to have to manually select it or even key bindings aren't the way to go. We could do something with the plugin like this. Pardon me for yawning. I got up rather early today to do various Thanksgiving related things. My wife is an avid baker, and she baked for the building yesterday, and today it was all about getting that stuff packed up and put out in the lobby. Shall we try making a thing like this? Now I'm actually interested, if we come back over to here, if I did something like print kwrgs and comment that out so that the build displays its output. Whoops. Oh, yeah. Hang tight. Yeah, I know, guy. You're still unhappy. There we go. So that build actually executed. Oh, is it still broken? Wait, what? No, it's not still broken. Pardon me. The arguments that it's currently getting is no arguments at all. Previously, it got that one. Oh, actually, it should be safe to put those back now because we're not actually executing anything. So we can see the arguments that it got. So here's a question that I have. If I did something like Windows, and said OS is Windows, like this, we don't see anything there. If this was Linux, do we see it here? We do not. Oh, pardon me. If I change this to Linux 2, smart party. Batch build, file regex, working dir, shell command, OS, Linux. What if this was in here? Whoops. Let's say this is the item at index 0. Does this show up in there? Index 0. What if this was Windows? Still there. So we lose a bit of facility for something like that, but it's still something that we can do. Pardon me. That one's been building up for a little while. Size that back a little bit. So pass a list of stuff and join them in a custom target and run using shell command. Another way to do the same thing as well. I want to say I've seen something like that done before. It can get kind of tricky with regards to a appropriately quoting things for the shell. I think for a while there was a bug in, pardon me, Terminus related to that. I need to be drinking more of this coffee to see if it will keep me awakened. But the idea behind this would be our command takes any number of arguments, not just one, and it keeps track of which one of them it's actually building at any given time, and then could manipulate its way through them. We could also take this into a situation where it just executes arbitrary commands for that matter. I don't know how well that would actually help anybody, though. Whoops. That is a little bit of a pain in the butt. Let's see. That is all right. So let's play with that a little bit. This would probably have something like builds is, let's say, none to begin with, and build index is 0 to begin with. Our run needs to do a little bit more stuff, and that needs to do a little bit more stuff. So basically, we need to implement everything. So we need to decide how we actually want the build to look. I'm going to move some of these things over to the side, like so. And yeah, we'll keep that over there as a reference too, but I don't think we really care about it at this particular juncture. Taking our, let's call it batch builds. This is not a valid selector. It should be source.json. Apologies on that. Talking and typing at the same time. Come on, guy. Source.json. Yeah, it should still be a thing. We can actually see it executing up there. But over here in this file, it theoretically should do nothing. Oh, wait. I specifically told it to use that build. Never mind. That's only for automatic. Righty tighty. All right. So in our for our purposes here, shell command should be I am the first shell command. For example, let's remove all of that. Let's replace this with that. And this one might have a shell command of exit 4, for example. So the idea is if there's a batch builds key, it'll execute first the first one, then the second one, then the third one, but it'll stop when there's actually an error. So is it possible to do something like this? One of the arguments this would get is batch builds. So we might say builds is equal to kwrgs.get batch builds, and the default value is an empty array. Hello, Ben. Welcome to the chat the stream. How are you doing this morning? I am sort of feeling the effects of staying up a little late yesterday to play some Metroid and be frustrated with it, waking up a little early today because my wife did a fair amount of baking for the building because it's Canadian Thanksgiving today, and then not getting any naps because we needed to modify the cookie situation in the lobby. Ayu says he needs help on something. What would you need help with, sir? I don't think we need a build index here. I don't think we need a build index here. think what we want is get the list of builds listed in the build system. If there are none, we're good. Okay, then we build args is equal to builds dot cache invalidation bug. The best kinds of bugs. Those are probably very easy to isolate and track down and replicate, right? Cool, Gbound. Always recommend going through the old preferences. Now it says on the defaults on the left are the ones that apply unless you modify them on the right. I would also give the advice that if there's one that something that says that it's can be overridden in the platform specific settings or something that you feel really strongly about, you could add it to your user preferences even though you have it set to the same as what the default is, because then if the default ever changes, you still have your setting in place. Well, that's nice at least. Small mercies, right? I'm kind of not looking forward to going back into work tomorrow because more merges are going to have to happen. Whoops. I did not mean to do that, sir. That's X. X0 is always the first thing, right? That is what we want for this. This is one of those things where when it's in Sublime Text 4, the caret style default changed from like smooth blinking, I think, basically one that blinks, to one that doesn't. But for the copy of Sublime that I use to record my YouTube videos, I have cursor blinking set off and I have it set to solid because it's easier to compose clips of screen captures that way without the cursor seeming to go all insane in its blink cycle. As a result, when that happened on that particular build, I never even noticed it because it was doing the same thing that it had always been doing. But for people that were committed to the default, suddenly the cursor wasn't blinking and everybody was really cranky about it. Well, one thing that I would always advocate for, Gbound, is just trying it out and seeing what you think one way or the other. What's Sublime Text based from? I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Augie, but also, hello. Sublime is a native application itself. It doesn't use any existing application framework or GUI framework or the like. I believe if you look at the blog, the Sublime Text blog, the very, very early entries by John discuss how he wanted a text editor that put more focus on editing area for text, which is why the sidebar hides itself, why there's not any toolbar type action. It's just using the maximum allowable screen real estate to display the contents of your files. And that's also why the view layouts work the way they do as well. I think that was the driving motivation, at least initially. Also find and replace. Whoops. Find, replace panels that would normally be a big floating dialog box that gets all up in your business are now nicely out of the way. Sublime's first business, if you will, is to the actual action going on. Well, you're doing pretty good, Augie, but in any case, hello, welcome to the stream. I think that was the issue. You still didn't point out what he needs help with, unless he said it and I missed it. If you posted a link, Ashwin, YouTube probably ate it. Did you post a link in the chat, Ayush? Because if you did, YouTube didn't allow it. You can send it to me in a private message on Discord, and I can get it that way and share it with the rest of the channel. OS path base name. Okay, let's see. Suppose my current position is after the dot. How would I implement a way so that I can get the type of things being returned by the thing behind the dot? OS. Okay, well, in that case, Leorek, Sublime Text is written in C++, and it also has a Python binding that it uses for its plugin host, but the core is written in C++, if that answers the question. Well, you ask a very complicated question, Ayush. There's no way. Here, check it out. Bob dot. Well, here's a dot. What's on the left? Bob. What's Bob? Is Bob a string? Is Bob a number? Is Bob an array? Is Bob a dictionary? Is Bob some random object? There's only one way to know, and that's to determine where in the code Bob was set to a value. When you see a line like this, you know that Bob's value is a string. So when you type the dot, you know the thing on the left is a string. That's not an inconsequential thing, and it's not something that you can do with regular expressions either. You need to actually know what the code is doing behind the scenes. You need to know maybe Bob doesn't exist at all. Maybe Bob started off at the top of the file with a string value, but at some point it was changed to 12. Now it's a number. What was the most recent thing that happened? Exactly. So what you're basically asking is, how can I re-implement LSP to be able to have the code intelligence to do something like this? And that's kind of the equivalent of asking someone, how can I paint the Mona Lisa? It's possible. It's not something that you just get a few tips and you're good to go. But that is what the LSP package is actually doing behind the scenes to some degree. It's trying to figure to the best of its ability what things are so that it can provide that code assistance. Yeah, what if a function call is there? That's another potential problem. It would probably be helpful, Ayush, if you pointed out, you could describe what it is you're trying to build, because it sounds like what you're trying to build is LSP. And if that's the case, then maybe you could use an LSP command to extract the information that you need to display it yourself or create your own completion. But if that was the case, why wouldn't you just use LSP in the first place and not bother writing one yourself? There's a reason why built into Sublime, the ability to navigate between different symbols is based on having seen them somewhere. And that's because having something that's language agnostic that provides the level of code intelligence that a dedicated IDE for a language, that is, something that's tricky to pull off. Yeah. So, oh my goodness. Nero Rick with a $5 chat. Thank you for your tips and tricks. I learned TermView from you, among other things like compiling. Just a little something to say thank you. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. We can share that in the. Oh wow, check that out. It's even got a little glowy thing. That's never happened before. Hey hey. Thank you so much for. And I mentioned this earlier in the stream. By the way, today is Canadian Thanksgiving, and the things I'm thankful for included Sublime Text and also the amazing people that are in the Sublime Text community here on the channel, because the subscription pile is just going up, and I get a lot of very positive comments, including where do I buy my shirt? And the answer to that is I self-printed the shirt that I wear in my videos. I don't sell those, and I don't own the rights to the logo. You'd have to talk to Sublime HQ for that. Maybe they have official merch coming up. Who's to say? Thank you very much, Liroek. I'm probably not even saying that correctly, in which case I apologize. But yeah, it is Canadian Thanksgiving today, second Monday in October, or as my wife likes to call it, practice Thanksgiving, because she's American, and American Thanksgiving happens in November. So this is the Thanksgiving where we get to practice how the real Thanksgiving is supposed to eventually happen. Good excuse to have multiple meals, don't you know? Lyroic. Yeah, I put the emphasis in the wrong spot there. I suspected that was probably the case, Ben. As I recall, he was the one that was sort of spearheading that whole thing. In fact, I even sent him some emails about Redbubble, which is actually something that I've set up. I added some if I've never mentioned this anywhere on YouTube, but if for some reason you are interested in, well, we'd have to actually turn that off. That's not going to work. Shoot. The Turkey Day rehearsal. Yeah, exactly. I have stickers on a Redbubble of my face avatar and the body avatar and the shirt with my head orbiting the Sublime logo, just because I wanted to have some of those that there should be arriving soon, hopefully. T-shirts will be arriving there soon. Nothing with the Sublime Text logo as a overt thing on it. But if you've ever had a burning desire to have my face on your water bottle, the world is your oyster in that regard. People asked, and away you go. But yeah, I set up a Redbubble, and I send information about it to Will a ways back as well, but that was before he left. But I can tell you, there's now at least 8 people that would definitely buy a shirt if you were selling them. Not the least of which would be me. I would buy many, many shirts. My wife would be very unhappy. On the other hand, during my vacation a couple of weeks ago, I built a new dresser for us in the bedroom to double our storage capacity, so I have more room for shirts now than I had previously. Let's see. The logic of what we're trying to do, if the build looks like this, then when it's first executed, one of its arguments will be batch builds. We should extract that out. And then we would say, let's see. If build, oh, good grief. Yeah, I think that would work. In my head, anyway. The idea would be the core of the build that you use would go in there. When you execute this, the keyword arguments that you get have that. We could even, well, we can get it out. If it's empty, leave. The actual arguments we're going to build with are the first items there, and then we can say build args dot build args is equal to builds like that, so that it's all of the remaining items but this one. And then instead of that, it would be build args like this. So when it gets executed, let's see, we could say get the list of builds listed in the build system. If there aren't any, don't need to do anything else. We're good. Then extract the first set of build instructions, and then put the list back into the arguments with this one missing. And then we actually execute this build. I wasn't going to actually store this in a variable, but perhaps we actually need to. Let's give that a different name. We'll call that one batch. To get the list of batch builds, if there isn't any, leave. Then we can say self.builds is equal to batch 1, and then that's equal to self.builds, like so. Trying to think my way through this as we go, because if it was canceled, we don't need to do anything. We only really care to do something if the build was a success. So we can say stopping the batch, and this one is the build failed. Oh, actually we can do this. I believe that's the one we want. Status message. It's been replaced by Windows status message. Okay, so this would be self dot, oh, come on, window dot status message. Oh. Build canceled, stopping the build chain, let's say. And this one would be something like build failed, stopping the build chain. And here, build succeeded, executing next build. So those are the sorts of things that we want to have this actually do. And what we really need this to do is re-execute itself with the arguments that it already has. So if that was the case, let's say this is build args like this. It starts off to be none. So now we can say get the list of builds listed in the argument. Let's say this is. If there are none, we're good and can stop executing now. What we actually want to do is get the build instructions to use here and put the remainder back into the arguments. I have a custom. The question was, how do I get my functions to glow like that? In Sublime Text, you can only do this in Sublime Text 4. Sublime Text 3 doesn't have this ability, but you can say UI select, or sorry, customize color scheme. It'll open up a window with your color scheme on the left. This is read-only, and your modifications to that file on the right. I'm just going to move this over here to save time. and space on the screen so that you can see it a little bit better. The magic of color schemes is that because this is the whole one, this one contains just some changes, and these apply on top of the defaults. So what I've done here is a couple of things. One is brackets glow and their contents glow. So it may be hard to see, but that is glowing right now. And when I go inside the braces, they glow, and they also glow on matches as well. They match in a different color. That's what those things are doing, and also tags do the same thing. And I have a couple of different rules here, one of which would be glowing Python entities. I have a color scheme rule that says anything in Python that's a name or a support function should glow. You don't have to constrain it just to Python, but that's just sort of something that I did as a part of a stream. This is actually funny that you mentioned this because I don't have a lot of customizations in my color scheme. For example, if I did this, this is what the default background for Mariana looks like. I find it a little bit too bright, so I make it 3% darker. Also, I changed the color of the markers in the diff for knowing when files have been added. I have to do it down here so we can actually see it. That's the color for added lines. That's this. If I change this to blue, those change to blue as well. So I modified those to give myself a nicer color here. But I added this just because glow was added, and I wanted to know what exactly, what might that actually do? Can you send this file link to paste in mine? Well, if you're interested in this sort of thing, I can do that. Yeah, let's do this. We go like so, because I can never remember where it is, and then go into here and say indent is for no wrap. That's the paste. And ODAT nerds. Customizations on the Mariana color scheme. Let's go ahead and, you know what? I could have done this in a different way, but that's okay. If you're interested in looking at this file and seeing how it works, there you go. There is a link for you. I set this actually to glow as a sample of something while I was just working. Sublime Text 4 had the ability to do this. I thought, let's make something glow. And I added this just as a test. And I really like it. So I ended up keeping it. Similarly, and I don't think it works in Python, but if I had a scratch buffer for JavaScript, whoops. Bob equals true, Jim equals false. I have rules in here to make true and false glow as well, and also they're different colors. And the reason I did that was because somebody asked a question about it in one of the live streams, and I did it as an example, and I liked it, so I stuck with it. And most recently, I'm going to need a file for this. If I do that, I modified recently my theme to use the same font in the sidebar as I do in here, which gives it more of a monospace kind of look as opposed to the default, pardon me, which has actually grown on me. And again, I did that as just an example of a thing. And I decided I liked it. I actually went back and made the font slightly bigger and kept it. Still working on it. But yeah, glad to help. Nah, sorry, there's no drop game. No drop game on YouTube, Red. YouTube bots are a lot harder to create. If this was Twitch, I would tell you and everybody that you should go to twitch.tv/redjarojam and click the little follow button and follow that guy who just tried to cause anarchy in the YouTube stream with the drop game. I got to see your speed paint pumpkin, Red. Looked amazing. I got to tell you, I doubted you. I know. I can't. You probably can't believe it. I doubted what you were doing when you were painting those brown stripes onto the pumpkin. I couldn't figure out why you were doing that, and then you overlaid the orange on top of it, and it gave the exact perfect level of brown detail in there. And then I thought, I can't believe I doubted Red and his ability to do the fine arts. Terrible. That's a little diversion. I stream on Twitch as well as YouTube on Wednesdays and Fridays. And this fine gentleman is somebody that is a good friend and fellow Twitch streamer, although he does art and not programming. This is my art, making Booleans glow. 4 languages that have distinct items for them. Let's close that up as well. So what we want is when this build executes, everything in here is going to be arguments that we get in keyword arguments. You paint better than you... Yeah. Well, I guess. I don't know about that per se. I mean, your paintings are awesome. Like in particular, I'm thinking of the ones you did of the dogs for your mom and the other one for your mom. That was the larger, wide one. Plus all the stuff that you showed us from college. But your marker and your illustration stuff is extra cool as well. It's a different kind of art, but it's still awesome. By the way, the 500 follower piece for The Office is officially framed. So now I got to hammer another nail in the wall over there and make it visible in my YouTube videos. We got a couple of those, as I'm sure you know, since you're the one that packed them up, just to make sure that I would get one and Mary Sue can get one. And I have on my wall over there, I have a Rick and Morty piece, and right there I have a Minecraft poster. Mary Sue is going to have a wall on the wall behind her desk be, I don't know if it's going to be all your art, but there is going to be a bunch of your art in there. We have a bees memorial wall, but not in an office. Hey, thanks for stopping by. And, as we like to say, slumming it on the YouTube. Nice to see you. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, and I hope you posted up some pictures of your work as well, so I can take another closer look. I gotta check out everybody's too. It was wild. Walt needed to go for a walk. People kept talking to us about cookies. Ugh. Tricky business, don't you know? Whoops. We don't want to do that. All right. So if we walk through what it is we're trying to do here, we're building something. When this build executes, it's going to get the contents of the build as arguments, except for some. So we're going to assume batch builds is what we mostly care about for our purposes here. Now we're going to be slightly in issue here. Let us pop that item out. Just that Will was working on official Sublime HQ merchandise, because people keep asking me about how it came up, I should say, is because somebody else asked me how to get one of my shirts. Will was the one that was working on coming up with official Sublime HQ merchandise and setting it up in a store, and that's being delayed because he left the company and he's the one that was doing it. So actually being able to purchase your own shirt with the Sublime Text logo on it, much like mine, is a little bit farther away than we might hope. is what you missed there, basically. I just made an important realization in the thing we're trying to do here. Let's swap these coffee cups over because this one has soup in it. Does that actually work? Yes, cool. From the arguments that we were given, pop the batch builds, which it should be an array, defaulting it to be an array, and if there aren't any, leave. Otherwise, the arguments that we want to use to build are the first item from the batch. Then we need to save in our arguments array. Oh my goodness. Why is the Sublime Text popularity decreasing instead of it? Is it popularity of Sublime decreasing? Possibly, as people become more dependent on using their, or requiring or relying on their editor to tell them everything there is to know about their code, which is something that Sublime can't do as well out of the box without extra packages being installed. People might be leaving in order to go to editors that do something like that, which might not operate as fast as Sublime, but do provide that level of stuff. Indeed, Ashwin. I mean, I don't know exactly. I don't work for Sublime HQ, despite what many people think. Based on how I seem to be everywhere that Sublime Text is. But if you use something like Redbubble, which is the place where I posted my stickers, what you do is you provide them the artwork and say, this can be put on a shirt, it can be put on a hat, it can be put on a button, it can be put on sweatpants, it can be on a mouse pad. And for each one of those things, my markup is 5% or 1% or 20% or whatever it is. And that's all you have to do. Redbubble will run the store for you. If somebody purchases one of your items, they collect the money. They dispatch it for printing. They're the ones that dispatch it for shipping and take care of customer satisfaction. If there's a problem, you talk to Redbubble, and they will negotiate and resolve the problem. And then you just get cut a check at the end of the month if you've made, I think, like $20 or more. So from that perspective, it is completely hands-off. Maybe not the greatest way to make money if you have really tight margins, but if you just want to get merchandise out there for people and you don't want to mark it up and make any extra money off of it, once you set it up, it basically just runs itself. That's the sort of thing that Will was interested in even when he was working on this sort of thing, because nobody had time or the inclination to babysit a t-shirt store, basically. What does the line color represent? Oh, in this particular file here, the blue lines on the left-hand side are an indication that these are lines that have been modified from the original file. If we create... Oh, my goodness, what was this? Someone subscribed to the channel. Thank you very much. That is very tiny writing there, and I don't have a panel that will show me, so I'm afraid I'm not entirely sure who that was, but thank you so much for the subscription. But yeah, they're diff markers. If we open a sample file, we can actually see. Yeah, let's do this. Come on, man. Here's a file to play with. File is completely empty on the side. If I delete some lines, you get that little red arrow that says, at this point in the file, something was deleted. If you modify a line, then you get a blue bar that says this line was here previously, but it has been modified. And if you type new stuff, we've got to do it in a way where it doesn't actually impinge on anything. That part is a little bit trickier, but basically it would be green. like this. That means these are lines that are new in the file. You can navigate between those to see all of the changes, and for each individual one you can toggle to see what exactly used to be there. This is the text that used to be there, but now it's no longer there. Or this is the text as it used to exist, and now it looks like this. So an O was deleted. And here, those lines are there now, and they didn't used to be before. And as Ashwin points out, that can work a couple of different ways. These files are tracked by Git, so it tracks that here. You can revert it back to the initial state. Or if this is a file that's just generically on disk, then it's related to the content of the file at the point at which it was opened. And a key thing about this is that it allows you to, as you just saw, I can delete this, then I can modify this, then I can do this if I wanted to change those. But if I wanted to undo this, normally you'd have to undo this and then undo this and then undo this and then redo this and then redo this. But here we can just say, this is the stuff that used to be here. Put it back. And do selective undos if you like, which is pretty fancy. And you can do the same thing for the whole file as well. I have a video on that on the channel as well. Actually, come on, guy. Don't be that way. Don't be that way, guy. Don't be the guy that does the thing in the place, man. We need tools, YouTube editor. Book. Yeah. I'm aware. Let's do this. I don't do this frequently enough on this particular computer. So, balls. Now I gotta quit and restart now because I messed that up. Pardon me. I'm thinking of changing this package, by the way. Put you back over here where you belong. I clicked the wrong channel, guys. Can you believe I did such a thing? Yeah, well, I always do it from the key binding, but yeah, it's also available in the menu as well. There we go. If we delete this stuff, you can right click. Does it show up in here? You can show the diff hunk like so, and you can revert the diff hunk. I tend to do that via key bindings, so like that instead. But yeah, also it's up. Oops. It's up in the menu somewhere, but I can never remember off the top of my head where it is because I very rarely go into the menu. Revert modification and toggle diff hunk are items that you can actually do from there as well. And I have a video on that as well. I can't remember off the top of my head what it actually is. But let's just close that, shall we? So we don't have to do anything fancy with that. It's a very popular feature, I find. Very few people get angry about that one as opposed to some other changes. The way that I envisioned this is slightly more complicated because I forgot that when you pass stuff to the exec command, it can't have any keys in it that exec doesn't already know about. So, how do we actually pull this off? Suggestions from the chat. Do you know a way for us to make this plugin do kind of what it is that we're trying to pull off here? Which would be, it needs to be able to get arguments from its keyword arguments, and it needs to be able to actually pull them from somewhere else as well. I was going to just short circuit things by passing them straight through, but that does not actually work. How's the multi-exec going? I mean, it could be better. The list of, let's say, saved builds starts off empty. The list of builds that we want here is going to be self.savedBuilds or something from the arguments if this is the very first time. And if there aren't any, we can leave. Then the ones that we're actually using to execute come from batch, and self builds becomes the list of items in the batch except for that one. We don't put that one back in. Now when this build gets executed, batch builds will have the value of the key in the arguments, and on the first pass through it gets popped out, leaving as the items that are passed in here only that. Which means that this, as it currently exists, in theory, if I save that and it builds, when I execute the build, and that build is actually selected from the menu, we should probably make sure that is still set to test multi-exec. This should, I guess, in theory, just print out I'm the first shell command. But it doesn't. Oh, pardon me. I forgot some echoes. So, there, I'm the first shell command, and it stopped. So, if that's the case, then when the build finishes, if there isn't one, leave. If it was killed or canceled, if you will, then it'll just display a message in the status bar and stop. It'll get the exit code. If it failed, it'll say it failed and do nothing. If it succeeded, then we need to self.window.run command, and the command to run is going to be multi-exec, and the arguments to pass are going to be batch builds. And the value of that argument is self.savedBuilds, like this. And also, we probably want to do that. So in theory, have a good night, or good day, rather, Ashwin. We'll probably be ending here fairly soon. I'd like to keep the YouTube streams to about 2 hours or so. Got to get to bed for an early morning meeting tomorrow. Hey! Fun times were had by some, I guess. So let's just trace through this and see if it's going to do what we think it's going to do, which is when the very first time you run it, it will have the arguments from the build, which will be batch builds. That's the part of this that is interesting and important. It's going to say that the batch to execute is either the list of saved items, which is initially none, or that. Yeah, indeed. Whee! It's a planning meeting, too. That's extra exciting. I think we have a bug here. Get the first build off of the list of builds. And put the remainder into our instance variable for when this first build finishes. Okay, and that part all goes away, and then we can reformat that, and life is good. If this is killed, or here, we can say this dot saved builds is equal to none to reset. OmniSharp for Sublime. Interesting. Is that the tool that comes from JetBrains? Or am I thinking of ReSharper? I can't remember. I think this might do what we want, or it might blow up horribly. Let's see. Oh, whoops. My bad. Nano name this is not defined. I've been doing a lot of JavaScript lately. Okay, here we go. And what do we get? Running echo, I am the first shell command, and then it exited 4. So if I do this, it says build failed, stopping the build chain, and it's stopping there with exit code 4. And the thing that it executed was exit 4, which is this. If I comment this out, then it should say it did the first shell command, and then it did I'm the last shell command. You only ever get to see the output from the last build. But in theory, this will do the thing. And if something in the middle stops it from working, then it stopped from working. So as a concept, this works. It leaves a fair bit to be desired in the implementation of the thing, which is a lot of things that while I pondered this when I created the video and said that this is something that we would work on in tonight's live stream, what I gave it a little bit of thought and thought it's conceivably possible to do something like what we're doing right now in this code, to chain builds together like this. But there's probably weird edge cases associated with this. And I didn't want to put too much thought into those so that we could explore them here in the stream. But things that come immediately to mind are what other parts of the build should this actually be? And it clears the build output on every build, which means you don't get to see a running tally of everything that was added to the panel. You only get to see the last build, which potentially is not what you actually want to have happen. So I don't know that there's necessarily a great way around that. Let's finish up by looking at the exec command, and in particular, its methods for on data is what gets called whenever a program generates some output into the panel. If there's not a running process, nothing happens. Otherwise, it is written to the panel and maybe truncated if it's a little bit too big. But this is what it actually does when it sends stuff. It uses append to add characters to the end of the particular panel, the build output panel. And well, apparently we do some notification checks as well. If we're supposed to update those, then check that off. In a more complete situation where we did something similar to this, we would need to modify a little bit how this works, which I believe would require us to completely copy the source for the exec command into our command. And I'm not sure what the legalities of that are copyright wise, but the issue is that every time this executes, it calls create output panel. The very first time you do that, it creates the panel as the name suggests, but after that, creating it recreates an existing panel and clears it. So this always, as a result of the exec command, clears the build panel output every time it starts a brand new thing, which stops you from being able to see an overall tracking of everything that executed. I'm not sure if that makes this a show-stopping item or not, though. But the concept on the whole is sound. And we could take this to another step, because there could be other items in here besides this. This is assuming all of the arguments are a build. We could do the exact same thing that this uses for variants, by saying that when we grab the values from here, instead of defaulting to that, we could do that in a slightly different way and say that any other keys that are in the top level are set, and then this applies on top of it, so that if there was a working directory, it would be shared. Something to think about anyway. And this is one of those things where it's easy to conceive of an idea that something could or should happen, but there's often a lot of details in the minutiae that may not be immediately obvious, which is why you should always take it, never post a bug report or something that says the easy fix would be, as if you know that it is actually easy, because it perhaps might not be. Okay, and SoulPlay says, I have a portable version of Java on my USB and I want to code with Java. Is it possible that I have a portable version of Java and Sublime Text uses that? If yes, how would the build system look like? Well, that is an intriguing question. Let's experiment, shall we? And see what we shall see, because items that are available in a build for variables include the location of the packages folder, the location of the project, the general answer to the question is yes, but. Because when it comes time to execute a program as part of a build, and let's look at the Python build, for example. That's the package, pardon me. The default Python build asks the system to please run Python 3. The location that is searched for this is known as the path. So all you need to do is have the path set up to include the directory where your portable item is actually installed, and then it would find that version of the thing. Now the trick is actually setting that up. Do you keep your projects in a particular place? The key to doing something like this on the whole is to use shell command and this env key, essentially. But the trick becomes how we get that to expand out in a meaningful fashion. This really seems like something that I have been asked previously, but I don't think I have a readily constructed answer for it. Okay, well in this particular case I happen to have a Java installed, so that doesn't necessarily help here. I believe you're probably going to need no, you don't need to edit them on a persistent basis. You can definitely here. Let's do a thing. I'm going to open up. Well, okay, let's yeah. We'll open up this and make a directory called test. I already have one. Pardon me. Well, I'm going to make a directory called build test, like this, and cd into build test, and then add that folder to this window. So now that folder exists right there. And then we're going to have a C file in here. So let's touch. Well, you know what? Let's do Java, let's say. So let's touch sample.java. And there can just be some stuff in here. We open the file and say, I am the Java code. Like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set, let's see, the name of the tool you want to execute is Java. So we need to have something in here. This is just a test. We're testing how this might actually work. So now, here when I type Java, I get the actual Java compiler, right? Like this, for example. But in this directory, when I run Java, it's expecting to cat a file in this particular case. No, that's probably a bad list of things to pull off. Nevertheless, what you would do is this. Create a new build system. We want to do something. Here we want to call Java and then the name of the file. Like thus. Let's say. This is what you would be doing. Well, actually, you'd probably be using Java C, for example. Maybe you're doing multiple things, nevertheless. We're going to save this as a sample build, just so that we know what it actually is. And I'm going to set that build up here, like this. Here's the magic of this. You have a shell, it has to be shell command that does the thing that you want to do in the build. In this case, it's trying to use Java C to compile a particular thing. And because this is Java, you may have a selector that looks like that as well, so that this build is automatically selected for Java programs to make your life a little bit easier. And now, when this file is open and I hit the build, it says Java C command not found. And if I search, indeed, there is a Java C, but that is not actively finding it, which is kind of funny. That's weird. Oh, that's neither here nor there for this example. I know exactly why that's doing that. It's a whole system setup thing. But check it out. This actually works well, because when I run this, it says Java C is not found, right? But what I can do is add an env key and say that the environment variable that I want to set is path. And the value that I want to set for the path is dot followed by whatever the existing value of the path is. And now, may not have done that correctly. This always messes me up. Right. Let's do this. Path is empty, you say. This isn't the most exciting demonstration in the world. I was actually going to end the stream 10 minutes ago. This is possible, but off the top of my head, the gist of the idea is what I was going to say is the solution to the problem is twofold. First, you have to have some variable or some way to know based on an existing known thing where you have installed the Java program. Otherwise, here, let's double check that I did this part right as well. Just real quickly. Nope. Sheeps. In this particular case, I see why that doesn't work. Pardon me. Well, one would have thought anyway. That's weird. Then it thing isn't being set up. We can go into this in more detail in another live stream, or maybe this would actually be an interesting topic for a video. This could be the topic of this week's video as well, if we work through exactly how this is supposed to work. The key points are this. One, build systems allow you to have a key in them named env, which you can use to modify the environment for the process as it's being executed. You don't need administration rights to do this. It's not going to be in any way permanent. This is just something that tells Sublime, while it's executing this command, update the environment with these variables in this particular fashion. And with that, everything will work the way that you want. Now, in order to do that, one of the items you have to add to the path is the location for your Java install. And that has to be in some kind of known location. As you say, if it was in your packages folder, then you could easily get at it by using $packages. Not the greatest idea in the world, because anything that's in that package, Sublime is going to constantly monitor for changes that could potentially slow stuff down, especially if it's on a USB stick. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't actually tested that. But if you knew it was always in one directory above packages, that would be a way to do it. Essentially, it needs to be in a place that's relative to something like the packages folder or the installed packages folder, anywhere that is in one of those items. Or if all of your projects were on the USB stick, then you could base it based on the project. But basically, you need to have some way to know relative to, say, the packages path, exactly where a thing sits. Then you modify the build to have an environment key that modifies the path. For some reason, that's not working. I always get it wrong the first time. I don't do it very often, so we'd have to investigate that. That'll tell Sublime, while it's executing this one particular program, do this to set this up. And then it would be able to find it. Now, that said, that location relative to something is the sticking point here, because build variables only get expanded in command, shell command, and working dir. They don't get expanded anywhere else. So you might need a plugin to know the location where Sublime is installed. Java is in the same parent directory as that. That's something that you could potentially do with a very simple plugin in a build. But it all comes down to how you restore the files on your USB stick. Is essentially the magic of that. Now, I'm pretty sure somebody has asked this question previously. There is some precedent for this, because sublime.executable path, if you use it from the plugin host, will tell you exactly the location where Sublime Text is installed on your system, which in my case is home team Martin local and this. So if it's one directory level up from packages, which is also something that exists, sublime.packages path, like so, that'll give you this. A plugin could do something with that and say that the path is something like $packages /./Java bin or something. That should be a $sign and not that. The trick is that this variable won't work in this position without a plugin. But if it's always in a known location, definitely a doable thing. I know I've helped somebody with this before. Are you on Windows, or are you on Linux, or are you on Mac OS? Because that could conceivably change things too. I'm assuming Windows or Mac OS. Mac OS might be a trick. Java on Macs has always seemed to be kind of fraught with some minor peril. you would need to do something like this, you would need a plugin. Here's what we're going to do to test this. The reason why that doesn't work is this. That won't work, but this will. If this was dot, and that was that, then when this build executes, we need to turn off word wrap in this thing. The first thing that's displayed is the path to the current file, which is in packages user. The second thing is the path, where the path is now a dot followed by what the path used to be. If I was actually in a Java program and I did this, the path should be that. The working directory should be build test. So this should be finding that. I'm not entirely sure why it's not. Because it's definitely updating the path, as you can see here. We may need to set a spell on this and revisit this after I do a little bit of behind the scenes investigation. Also on Windows, how this looks is slightly different, and I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head because it uses something different. For example, on Windows, this would be a semicolon and not a colon. Colons aren't valid to separate paths in Windows because it has drive letters. So it uses semicolons instead, whereas everything else uses colons. This build is saying that it should automatically select for Java. When it does, before it executes, the path should be updated to include a dot and then the path. And the working directory for this thing is the location in which the file that's being built is stored. And the shell command executes, it displays the name of the path and then the actual path, and then uses Java C. And if we, I just want to clear that, we can just build this. This is the command that it was executing. It executed echo and the name of this particular package. And it wanted to echo the path and then javac that file. So I'm not entirely sure why that is not working. That is very weird. Because I keep falling into the path of here. It should at least do something. Let's clear the console just to make absolutely for certain. Let's clear the console by clicking in the right location, shall we? That's not the console. This is the console. Did I do that? I didn't, did I? Oh my god, I'm an idiot. Oh, I'm a gigantic idiot. This is... No, that is set to the sample build. No, that's right. This is the build that is being executed. Yeah. Oh, okay. What if I did this instead? No? Here it is. Okay. That worked. Okay, so first of all, we're going to do this. And maybe we should do it a couple of times. Because I fat-fingered that. But eventually, the thing actually worked. So, how do we make this work for you in a portable build? You don't want to do it the same way that this is doing it. You want to base it off of the packages folder, correct? So, I'm going to use as a base for this, we're going to do this. The Java-C Sublime build, like this. This is the build that ships directly with Sublime for compiling Java. Okay. We're going to add in this. We're going to add in $packages // Java, like this. Or, well, we'll call it JDK in this particular example. And then that, like so. Save that. Now, if I go to the packages folder, which is here, if I go down one directory, I make a folder called JDK. Inside of JDK, I link. This part here is for setting up how your Java build would actually work. Don't actually do this part, of course, to Java-C in this location. So now, got no. There's now a program called Java-C in a directory named JDK inside of the folder that is one level below packages. So packages, up one level, a directory named JDK. Packages, up one level, something named JDK. Here's JDK. This would be the bin folder, obviously. Now, if we actually try to use this build to compile the Java code, it should not technically work. In this case, it might accidentally be working. So we need to, unless packages actually expands inside of environment. I don't think it does. Yeah, that's what I thought. So to do this, you need to use a plugin. And we might say we want to create a new plugin. Oops. And this is going to look very similar because we've already played with this tonight. From default.exec import exec command, like this. And then this will be exec command. And the name of the actual command will be something like portable exec command, let's say. And this should take any and all keyword arguments. And what it should actually do to execute the build is use super run kwrgs, like this. So again, we've created, and we'll save this as portable exec and say that a simple drop-in replacement for the exec command that adds the folder immediately does it expand out that way? I guess that would kind of work there, wouldn't it? It would be ugly, but it would work. All right, fair enough. Let's leave that for the time being. You could indeed do something like, well, how do you do this on Windows? On this, we would say, whoops, pardon me. Instead of doing that, the problem with that is knowing where it is because it's portable. That's the part that's sort of messing this entire operation up. Whoops. the general gist would be something like what Ben is saying is you could say path is equal to dollar packages slash dot dot slash JDK. Well, actually, you wouldn't even be able to, you need to do that. You could just do this. In this particular case, well, and this particular idea is that the portable stuff is going to be installed inside of the same parent folder as the packages folder. So simplistically, that will do what you want. Yes. If you want to actually do it that way. This path would actually look much more monumentally heinous. But the idea behind the plugin was that it would be able to do something like this for you on the fly, adding that in so that you could assume that stuff in that folder is already in the path. But this is indeed the path of least resistance. So, yeah. Do that. And then install your JDK inside of the same folder as the parent folder of packages, not inside of packages in this particular case. And then this would probably be something a lot more heinous, like this. If you go into opt JDK 14.0.2 bin. So, I mean, that would probably look like this. If this was actually being done that way, then away you go. And then make sure that you put that directory inside of the parent directory for packages. So, you know, browse packages, go up one folder, make this thing that I put here, install your JDK Jiggy there in your portable build, and then make your build system do this. This variable doesn't expand inside of env. It only expands inside of command, shell command, and working dir. So any and all commands that you use in the build would have to have a prefix like that on top of all of the commands to tell it exactly where to find it, because it won't be on the path. Or if you're chaining multiple things together, you can try to update the path on the fly. I'm not sure how well that works on Windows. I'm not particularly big on shell scripting stuff in Windows. Theoretically doable, I would imagine, but I don't know off the top of my head what the syntax for it is. I only know it's different than Linux because there's a magic node program that you use to make sure that, you know, cross-env, to make sure that you can set the environment for a single program no matter what platform you're on. But yeah, that's a good point, Ben. I always go to the plugin route for things, just because I tend to not like that sort of thing. On the other hand, if you always know that your projects are stored on the USB stick in relation to the install folder for Java in a very specific way, like there's always a folder called projects Java or something, and that's where you store everything, you could do the same sort of trick without having to put it inside of the packages folder. It could be outside where you might expect it, but on the whole, that's probably the way that you want to go for something like that. And if you hit me up in the Discord, you know, we can provide this again if you need additional help on that. I need to reach. But it is time for me to crawl into the bed and get some sleep, because I have a very early morning planning meeting tomorrow. Thanks to everybody who hung out tonight. And extra special thanks to Larosic, which I think I'm pronouncing correctly, for the thank you tip on the video, or on the for providing help. That is most generous of you. Good night, Dev. See ya on Wednesday on Twitch, which is the next thing that I was going to say. I'm going to be live on Wednesday on Twitch at twitch.tv/odatnerd, and also on Friday as well. I use Sublime Text to develop stuff. We don't necessarily do Sublime Text plugins, but if you got questions about Sublime, you stop in, say hi, hang out. There is a very fun and robust community over on Twitch as well. That's going to do it for here. I'd like to point out also, before I go, that it's possible there might not be streams on YouTube during December if I decide, like a crazy person, to do a Devember project where I stream every single day in December. Then I would probably do that on Twitch and not on YouTube because I don't want to harass the hell out of my subscribers. More information on that as it develops because I have to come up with an idea first. But that's going to do us for here. I'll see you next week in the video, next week at the live stream, later this week in one of the Twitch streams. I hope you guys have a fantastic night. If you have any further questions about this or anything else, you can always message me on Twitter at odatnerd or on the forum at odatnerd, or just ask a question on the forum and I'll probably answer. There's a Sublime Text Discord. I have my own Discord. There's a lot of different ways that you can get questions, including the comment section of all videos available here on the channel. This live stream is going to be automatically added into the Sublime Text Live playlist, visible on the channel, and then unlisted when the stream is done, but you can always come back and watch this again. Chat will replay. Until the next video, this is odatnerd asking you to please have a sublime week.
Thanks, Dev.